Hello, welcome back to Talking Into the Void. Today I'm going to be talking about video game movies. Notice I'm filming outside because it's a nice day, why not? But you may hear outside noises like wind chimes, birds, occasional hummingbird attack, occasional boar bee attack, and maybe the occasional really noisy bit of farm equipment running around because I'm in the middle of the country and therefore middle of nowhere, and there's a farm next door. But I digress. So, why did I choose to talk about video game movies? Well, because for the most part, video game movies suck. It's just something about the adaptation from a semi-performative medium like video games, because video games need you, the player, to complete them, and therefore you become part of it, versus the movies which you just sit down and watch. And something in that causes the adaptation process to be a nightmare, which is why most properties that get adapted don't do well. Now, there are a lot more video game movies, adaptation movies, than out there than I've ever seen. Like, I didn't know Double Dragon had a crappy adaptation, but I did know about the Street Fighter one. Of the ones I've seen the Mario Brothers movie from the 90s. I've seen the two Mortal Kombat movies from the late 90s. I've seen the Doom movie from the mid 2000s. I've seen a couple of Sonic cartoons and a bootleg version of the one Mario anime from the late 80s. I've seen the Prince of Persia film, both Tomb Raiders, the Angelina Jolie Tomb Raiders, not Alyssa Vikander ones. I've seen Detective Pikachu, Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2, the World of Warcraft movie. I think that's it for, well, and Kingsglaive and Advent Children, but I don't know if those two fully follow the stuff, but so I guess that's about a dozen of the many video game movies that exist. Because I know for a fact I've not watched Street Fighter movie, I've not seen the Double Dragon movie. Actually, there's a couple Street Fighter films, I have not seen any of them. I think there's a Halo thing, or is there just another Doom one that I definitely didn't watch? But I digress. So, my video game movies that I've watched library is small. But of those films, the only ones I could say objectively that were good are the two Sonic the Hedgehog films and Detective Pikachu. I have guilty pleasure watching Doom, the one with Carl Urban in it as Doom guy, and The Rock as the bad guy. Like, that's a guilty pleasure film for me. I enjoy the cheesy first Mortal Kombat adaptation. Oh yeah, I saw the new one of that, so that's 13 video game movies. I have not yet seen Uncharted. I do want to see it, just so I can watch it and say I've seen it. Anyway, and I've not seen the Ratchet and Clank film. But most of these films, except for the Sonic cartoon movies and the Mario anime, which was weird, but I fall under bad to really bad categories as far as whether or not you can enjoy them. If I had to go on pure adaptation aspects, I forgot Serious Sam's a game and also a movie. So I think they made a Hitman movie. Like, I need to stop because there's lots of video games who movie adaptations that exist but I've not seen. So let's just say I've only seen about 13, but of that, only 3 I can unironically say are good. And that's Detective Pikachu, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Again, the other ones fall either in guilty pleasure category, like the first Tomb Raider film, first Mortal Kombat film, Doom from the 2000s. The rest are just either meh or awful, but straight up adaptation wise, the rest just fall in various degrees of awful, except for the cartoons. But I think I'm going to count the cartoons in their own category because animated adaptations seem to work a little bit differently to better than the live action ones. So of all the movie adaptations I've seen, the worst is, well, it's infamous. Don't know if it needs much introduction. That'd be the Super Mario Brothers movie. But I think second worst of adaptation stuff is Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Third worst of the ones I've seen, Prince of Persia movie was pretty bad as far as adaptations go. So, how is it that of the many, many, many video game movie adaptations there have been, only 3 seem to have been agreed upon to have worked, and the rest don't? Well, I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to have to narrow the focus a bit by focusing in on the Sonic series, because now it's a series, Detective Pikachu, and one of the more valiant attempts at an adaptation with live action stuff for a video game. And that will be World of Warcraft. That's because I actually did a post about this years ago and decided that this would be a good video topic anyway. So why is it Sonic the Hedgehog series, Detective Pikachu, work, but World of Warcraft didn't? Well, I think the first and I think most key aspect is characterization. When it came to the World of Warcraft film, I can only remember one, technically 2 characters' names from that film. Durotan and Thrall. Notice those are CGI orc characters and one's a baby. I don't remember any of the live action humans' names. So I don't remember half orc chick's name. I don't remember hero man / knight guy's name. I'm going to call him Mr. Knight. I don't remember the king's name, which you think I would, considering I did play World of Warcraft for a little bit. And there's a statue to the guy, I think, in Stormwind. And I don't remember Mage Apprentice guy's name. So I did recently look it up, and it's Khadgar, but without looking it up, I would not have remembered that was his name. And of those 4 live-action characters, I only liked the Mage Apprentice. The King wasn't really on screen enough for me to care. Mr. Knight was boring as all get out. I did not care for him. His character trope was well worn by that point of grizzled, a-hole, reluctant hero type brought in out of retirement and blah, blah, blah. And half-orc chick's story didn't interest me either. I will admit it's only liking Khadgar, Mage Apprentice at all, because when I played World of Warcraft, I always played mages. I attempted other classes, like I think I dabbled in Paladin once, but I stick to pure casters if I can help it. So, what made Durotan and eventually Thrall, though he's barely on screen because he's a baby, more interesting to me than the human characters? His arc was better. His whole story is better. There was more emotion behind Durotan's digital captured performance than there was in any of the human performances. Mr. Knight, if I can remember anything from that film, digging it up from the memory hole, he looked bored the whole time. That actor did not emote. He was like a block of wood. A half-orc chick tried to emote a bit, but she didn't have much to work off of. And Khadgar had the best emoting of the human actors, though the guy who played the king was also a young Howard Stark from Captain America, so he wasn't bad, but he didn't have much to do either. So, Durotan, his character, I felt had a much more compelling arc. He had a much more compelling everything, like with his wife and his kid. Like, he had the better motive, but a better storyline. He was just the better character to follow. Anytime the humans were on screen, I was bored, except for when it was Khadgar, but he wasn't the main human. We were following Mr. Boring Knight around. Now, that's something where the other films I've chosen to highlight, Sonic the Hedgehog series and Detective Pikachu, did not fail. Their human characters, while not central, and well, one was half a buddy cop pair, so he was central, but with Sonic the Hedgehog, with Tom and Maddie not being the characters, it could have been easy to have them overstay their welcome, but you notice how I know their names very easily. Like, I don't call them Jane Marsden and other character. I forget the actress's name, which is bad, but I remember their character names because Tom and Maddie had characters. They were also likable characters, and you could understand the story arc was mostly Tom's, but Maddie was there too, supporting him and being pretty awesome most of the film. And again, didn't overstay his welcome. His arc made, well, he was part of a buddy pair for that first film, but his arc made sense. He played off of Sonic the Hedgehog well, even though James Marsden was really acting against a puppet standing in. And if I had a nickel for every time James Marsden was in a movie where he starred opposite a later CGI'd furry creature, I'd have 4 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's strange that it's happened 4 times. But I guess he's perfected his skill of acting against nothing thanks to Enchanted and that terrible movie Hop. But there was believable chemistry between Sonic and Tom, and it didn't feel forced. It felt right. Same goes for Tim and Detective Pikachu in the film. Because Tim, his story arc, you really felt because they focused in on the emotion of it, which for a Pokemon film, you don't want to go super crazy complicated because your target audience is 10, 8 to 10-year-olds, maybe some older nostalgic adults in the mix too. So you're not going to go super crazy complex, especially with character arcs. And it was just simple, heartfelt, and you felt it. The same goes for the CG characters for each of these films. Sonic's arc and then later Tails and Knuckles' arcs added in, they made sense for the film, and they built and played well off each other and the human characters when they interacted with them. And again, Pikachu and Tim's playing off one another was very good in Detective Pikachu. They made them mesh well. Am I going to pretend that any of the lines or script writing was masterpieces for the Sonic the Hedgehog movies or Detective Pikachu? No. But it fit, it made sense, and it made the characters all likable and made them all fit. Something else they failed at with World of Warcraft was they were trying to go for the origin for the setting of Horde versus Alliance. And I think that was the wrong story to tell. I mean, yes, Sonic the Hedgehog, the first one, was an origin film. But on the other hand, that one's an easier origin to film because Sonic's a hero and it's easier to do hero origin stories. This, they're trying to set up a long, drawn-out conflict between Horde and Alliance, with the Horde coming from a world destroyed by using evil magic. And I think demons were part of the whole thing. This whole thing of green skin versus not quite as green skin orcs thing. I may have played World of Warcraft, but I'm not up on the lore. I will be the first to admit that. But it was too much for one film. They should have drilled down on one story in particular and focused on that. For example, I think they should have focused on Thrall and how he broke the Horde away from the influence of that demon. That is a much more interesting story, and it's what they're leading up to with how the ending was Thrall being saved by a Moses-style basket down the river thing. It was too little too late, and the movie was only half focused on Duratan and all that stuff going on. Maybe if they had focused in on Thrall and done the Duratan stuff in flashback, that could have been better. That could have been a lot better, actually. But instead, they went too broad, too much. Whereas with Sonic the Hedgehog's origin story, it was focused on how did Sonic get to Earth and why he was running. And they don't go into too much detail about that because they don't need to. They just show Echidnas attacking Longclaw and Longclaw telling him, go here, and if they find you here, she had a whole escape route for him using the rings. Didn't need it fully explained, and since your character in the beginning was a little kid, there was no explaining it to him anyway. Expand upon that in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 a bit, with Knuckles' backstory, considering Knuckles is an Echidna as well. And Tails, we don't find out much about Tails' backstory aside from what little anecdotes he tells us, but we don't need a full backstory on Tails either. The films knew what to focus on and what not to. So Sonic trying to find his place on Earth, the first movie, and then trying to figure out who he is now that he has a place on Earth and finds friends. Because anyone who's played Sonic the Hedgehog games knows that Knuckles and Tails are his friends, so me saying he and Knuckles are friends is not spoiling anything. But all those arcs linked up and connect to each other, but they weren't too big. Yes, there was a bigger plot involving stuff in Sonic 2, but it didn't go too big, at least not any bigger than any of the video games did. And Detective Pikachu was focused on one central mystery, which is what happened to Tim's dad. It just focused on clue after clue going forward, trying to figure out what happened. And the plot got uniquely Pokemon twisted, which Pokemon has lots of weird stuff that happens. Like, if you ever seen some of the earlier anime stuff, it's really freaking weird. I remember an episode from when I was a kid where a Haunter pulled Ash and Pikachu's souls out of their bodies that they dropped a chandelier on them so they could play around as ghosts, but then they had to put them back because they realized that their living friends missed them. But yeah, and there's also episodes where psychic powers which don't quite work like that in the games turned Brock and Misty into dolls at one point when he was up against Sabrina. That's why they even were messing with that Haunter that technically accidentally killed Ash and Pikachu temporarily for an episode. That's why they're even up there, because they needed that ghost Pokemon to deal with Sabrina, who kind of gone off the walls with her powers, and it was just very weird. So Detective Pikachu went standard Pokemon levels of weird for its plot, and it worked, because it focused in on what was Tim's dad trying to investigate, what was going on, where does it lead, and they made the central relationship between Tim and the Pikachu that only he could understand talking for some reason, but we find out why later, but made it work. They focused in on that, and they didn't bother trying to do the origin of the Pokemon world. I appreciate that they took the approach of, if you're watching this film, you know what the Pokemon world is, you know what a Pokemon is, you don't need us to do an origin story for the Pokemon world. Because that would have been way too much anyway. They do a quasi little thing about the city he goes to, but that's it. It's just a little blurb here, a little blurb there. And it's one of those things we don't need to know a lot about. So what Warcraft did was too much. What these films needed to do was just do enough to fill in some gaps, but don't go overboard. And that's really where the other films kind of fall short, is they try to go overboard sometimes. Whether it be with self-seriousness in some cases, like the second Mortal Kombat film, I think, tried to be more serious, and the third one definitely, well, not third one, but the most recent one, that's like what took away most of my enjoyment from the 2021 one, or is it 2022? But the newest Mortal Kombat film, it took itself way too seriously. The films that worked, the ones I can say worked, and I'm confident in saying worked, followed a couple of different steps. They kept it simple. They focused on the characters and making sure the characters worked with one another. And they knew what story to tell. Can other video game adaptations work? Well, considering one of my favorite franchises from childhood is apparently being eyed up for an adaptation, Jak and Daxter, I'd have to say that what they'd have to do is keep in mind that you are adapting an already liked, I'd even say loved, material, and that you're dealing with a medium that originally allowed players to control where the story went, and that you have to choose a story to tell. Don't try to do an origin story if you don't need one, and make sure you really drill down on the characters and the character arcs. The Jak and Daxter series, well, luckily or unluckily, depending on how they botch the adaptation, because I don't have much faith in them, has an actual plot laid out to follow. It's just, will they be able to follow it, or will they not be able to resist doing what the people who adapted the Mario Brothers film from the 90s did, which was an adaptation in name only. But who knows? So, choose the right story to tell, focus in on your characters, and make sure they're likable. And respect your source material enough to adapt it so it's recognizable. Otherwise, if you don't understand these things, you really shouldn't be adapting video games into movies.